Hello and welcome to the Recognized Authority. I'm here today with guest Rebecca Gunter. Rebecca, thank you for coming on the show.
My God, it's my absolute pleasure and honor to be here. And I'm so jazzed to meet you. Thanks for having me on.
So we were just talking about the joys of live and everything. I have a construction site outside my window right here, so apologies if that's coming through. But we are live, and that's that. So
Raw,
Rebecca,
unscripted. Here it is,
unscripted.
baby.
Um, you champion marketing badassery for business accelerators and industry activists. You love brand strategy, creative copywriting, and positioning, which is what I want to talk to you a lot about today. Let's talk first about marketing badassery. What does that mean to you?
To me, marketing badassery is really just kind of a North Star of brand expression that is bold and unapologetic and authentic and genuine in a very front facing way. So, not trying to kind of vanillaize your the way you express yourself and the way you express your business and your brand and your entrepreneurial prowess without obsessing over who it's going to turn off, because that's actually part of the charm of marketing as well, is turning off the wrong people as well as turning on the right people, and feeling confident, feeling like you're living your best life in your brand expression.
Right. Who are you going to turn off? I like that. And that's something a lot of people are afraid of is I'm gonna lose out on some of the market. Half the people aren't gonna buy me if I say that.
That's exactly right. Half the people aren't going to buy you when you say that, and ends in that the best news ever, because the other half who will buy from you will be obsessed with you, and they'll buy again and again and again. So, taking it back to our old preschool, or I'm not quite sure in Ireland with the young, where the wee folks go and learn their lessons and their ABCs, but pay attention to the people who fill your bucket and ignore the people who take from your bucket. And so turning off people is just as important. In fact, it saves you an infinite amount of time that you would have normally wasted being on the phone with the wrong prospect or the wrong client. So stop wasting your time, be unapologetically yourself, be bold, be brave, and yeah, you're going to turn some people off, and it's actually great news.
What's unapologetically yourself? How does that actually come across?
I think that that means saying and being and doing things that maybe other people would be afraid to do. And that just means, I think a good example for that is the way that the beverage brand Red Bull will have these like outrageous kind of vehicle race. I don't even know what they're called, but like vehicle races, where you have to like build this like crazy kind of go-kart contraption. And I can imagine that leadership is saying, don't do that. That would just damage our brand in so many ways. Like, it's dangerous and we're liable, and that's all kinds of bad press. And now that's all anybody can think or talk about when they actually do it. So being badass enough to just say, like, okay, I know this seems like it's uh kind of off the wall here, but it's the thing that people remember. So
Mhm.
not worrying too much about who you're going to turn off, I think, is badassery.
So how do we take that and apply that concept then to like your and my type of business where we are service providers, we're consultants, and we don't have lots of cool graphics and free cans of drink that we can give out to people, and we don't have crazy ideas like building go-karts or diving off cliffs with wings on us, you know.
I don't know what you're doing at 4 o'clock, but that's what I'm doing. I'm jumping off a building with wings on, and that's entrepreneurship, right?
That's what it feels like sometimes, yeah.
One wing, the
Yeah.
other one's still like in there somewhere. You're like teasing it out.
Yeah. Like, if somebody's listening to this and is thinking, I need to do more of this, I need to be a bit more like this. Like, how do they? What practical advice would you have for them? Like, how can they actually implement this?
Actual implementation is maybe more than just, well, it is more than just dreaming up the craziest attention grabbing marketing campaign that you can think of. To me, it's about getting extremely focused on who your people are and what they need. So, kind of not paying attention to the competition, really. I guess now that we talk about it, and you've got me to kind of tease out what is marketing badassery and what's being unapologetic. It's not really paying attention to what the competition is doing, and it's not reading the comments. So, if for a service provider like ourselves, or someone who, again, may not be a highly caffeinated beverage company with deep pockets, or an Apple or a Volkswagen, or something that, a brand that can really blow it out of the water and be unapologetic, like financially and with infrastructure, we can do that by getting to know who our people are so deeply and intimately that when we're talking, they feel like we're talking directly to them. And that is because we are. So, really figuring out who are your people, what do they need, who are you, what do you deliver, and why are you special, different, or the one, will allow you to be unapologetic in that brand, because you're not questioning yourself. You're kind of out of, if you have any kind of identity crisis, you can kick that to the curb, and you're out of the ennui and indecision that comes along from like a just kind of an anemically defined brand, or just kind of not wanting to offend anybody. Well, we're for everybody. Well, sadly, then you're for nobody.
Hmm.
Because if everything is special, then nothing is special, and it's so easy to get lost in just a sea of sound the sames when you haven't done the work of really defining who you are. And you can do that with a pencil and a piece of paper. Once you know who you are, once you know who your people are, once you know what they need and how you're going to deliver it and why you're the one to do it, then being bold and unapologetic with your brand is simply a matter of how you write, how you talk, the pictures you use, the just the way you express yourself in business every day. And that's the confidence of being apologetic, comes from like knowing exactly, to the target knows who you are.
Hmm. Let me get into the weeds a little bit with you.
Yes.
You
Yes.
you mentioned, like, because I know this is something that I hear from people a lot when I'm talking to them, and they say, I'm just an X, whatever X is, that's their job title. I'm not really all that different from everybody else. And you're saying all you need is a pencil and a piece of paper. Can you just walk me through how somebody can actually try and implement that? They can practically find what is it that separates them from the sea of sameness, everybody else who does that same thing for those same types of clients.
The crux of it, when you think that you're just, I am job title, and you lead with your resume, how long you've been doing something. I've been serving X kind of clients for X amount of years because I am this thing. That everybody knows, that gets lost. Yet, how do you find yourself? I mean, that's as easy as saying, to a person on a personal journey, just go find yourself and come back with a pen and paper and let me know how it goes. It's not easy. And sometimes you need some deep facilitation, a business bestie, someone you can bounce some ideas off of. What happens, in my opinion, is that we get really lost in the reality of our talent base or our core competencies, to the point where we overlook the fact that not everyone can do it. Oh, everybody can. What do you mean? I just sat down and wrote a business letter. Everybody can do that. What do you mean? I just figured out how to impact the customer journey by pulling this lever at the operations level. It just makes sense to me. Absolutely makes sense to you because you've grown up in that kind of cosmology of that talent and not seeing it as special. So sometimes you need someone to pull that stuff out of you and help you kind of deconstruct what you think everyone has and understand what's really special about yourself. And generally, I find that comes down to a personal story or some personal impact that you have with the work. So if I'm doing positioning with someone and I'm answering the following questions: who are my people? What do they need? Who am I? What do I deliver? And why am I special, different, or the one? Almost always the because only part, or why am I special, is a personal story or a personal stake in the work. And there, you can't replicate that. You can replicate 25 years in the industry. You can replicate, I'm a business coach and I've been doing that for X amount of years, but you can't replicate your personal journey or your personal stake. And when you care so much about your people, it becomes almost like your imperative. You were called to this work to be of service in a particular way. And it takes some deep thinking about it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And sometimes a facilitator.
Yeah, and I think that comment about the facilitator is important because, and it doesn't have to be a business coach. It doesn't have to be a coach of any kind. It could be like a mastermind group, or it could be, a business peer who you kind of partner up with and kind of act as each other's therapist on occasion. I've done all of those things as well as having coaches.
I'm
And
sure you're really good at it too. I bet you have a unique perspective.
yeah, I probably do. I've been there, done that, made every mistake. So
You know what? I'm really actually tying two and two together right now in real time on this live with you. Is that um, if you can figure out what your zone of genius is, if you can figure out what makes you special and what makes you unique, and you can stand in that, you can't be unapologetic in your brand. And sometimes it is just a matter of figuring out what your POV is, what your perspective is. That's the uniqueness. I have this perspective in this way because of my experiences here and the people that I serve. So maybe it's a little easier to think about your unique differentiator or your because only or what makes you special, parsing that out, just thinking about what's my POV. And that might be easier to articulate and not need as much facilitation if you think about it as a POV or a point of view or perspective rather than what's my special God-given talent that I can't see and everyone else can.
yeah, okay. And now I kind of like that we're getting a bit nerdy on some of this, but I'd like to dive into POV with your point of view. So one of the things about figuring that out is sometimes it can be hard to figure out what your point of view is because like you're coming right there from it. Um, One of the things that I like people to do as an exercise is to write "I believe X because Y" and write down a bunch of belief statements. And all of those being core beliefs that they have about their industry. Is that an approach? Is that something like what you do? How do you tease that point of view?
Oh my God, I'm stealing that idea right now. That's awesome. Can you give me an example
um,
for yourself?
yes, I can. Yeah, very simple one. So I believe that referrals are dangerous, even though most of the industry in B2B are referral based businesses. I think that it's dangerous to depend on referrals because your network can dry up. People can retire and go away. So if you've got a dependency on referrals, your market, unless you're actively growing it all the time, it's actually shrinking. And also a lot of referrals that come in, if you change your positioning or you change your offering, the referrals can be irrelevant. And so I think that you've got to do something else besides referrals. And so for me, my point of view is that referrals can be a dangerous thing to depend on. And so I think you should be doing something else as well.
Oh my God, you blew my mind today. I would have never thought of that as a resource that was diminishing returns as you
Right.
grow your network. I would have never thought about it. I think the key thing you said there is understanding that it is a shrinking source or wellspring unless you nurture it.
Mhm.
So if referrals are the key, then nurturing it will be the, I don't know, the life spring, or shall we say. So don't just sleep on it and be like, oh, I just am word of mouth all the time.
Mhm.
And to your point of positioning, for sure. If you go in your LinkedIn profile and just rearrange all of your skills and endorsements, and then suddenly no one's endorsed you for them because they were kind of buried, but LinkedIn kind of auto populated these skills and endorsements. That's what people start knowing you for. So you have to do a reset of expectations. You taught me something today for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, well, that is one way that I like to help people develop point of view is by taking those belief statements and in particular looking for myths that you want to debunk or concepts that you can pick a fight with, that maybe you disagree with the way everybody is doing it, or you don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I really like the idea of creating an inbound lead generation system, which is usually creating a lot of content like we're doing right now. We're recording this as a podcast. It's being live streamed to about 8 different platforms right now as well.
How cool is that? It's a modern
So
world.
yeah, but creating kind of like that body of work that becomes this lead generation system. That body of work is bringing in these inbound leads for you, and so yeah, so that's my kind of point of view on lead generation, and so I'm picking a fight with the concept of referrals, and so that's something I talk to clients about is, is there a concept that a lot of people in your industry believe in that you think that maybe it's not quite right? And can you pick a fight with that concept? Because it's much better to pick a fight with a concept than with another person.
I don't know. It depends. Those are fighting words. Just kidding. I would just add that if your strategy is to generate content that then brings your leads in, you better really lock your positioning in, because if you don't, you're going to be spending a lot of time trying to vet and weed out the people who aren't a great fit for you. So if you're casting this really wide butterfly net, the things you're talking about had better be on point for what your position are, talking kind of directly to who your people are and directly about what they need and directly about who you are and what you deliver, and getting passionate about your why for sure.
And
So you have your
the,
position right on
the
point.
really cool meta thing is that's exactly what we're doing here today.
That's exactly. It would be super meta if I positioned you live. Maybe you'll be up for that in a future episode.
Yeah,
We'll
that
do
would be cool.
live.
That would be cool. I don't know if we have time for that today. Maybe we do.
I don't know that we have time for today, but we're going to at least touch on it. But I challenge you to go live with me and go through the discovery of positioning.
Oh yeah.
And why not?
Absolutely. I'm up for that.
Good.
Okay.
I love it.
Well then, since we're gonna slightly park that, I would like to talk to you about, I don't know, maybe this is the same thing or maybe it's not. Can you talk to me about how you think of positioning versus branding?
Yeah. Thank you. What a cool topic. Brand is defined so many different ways. It's, to me, brand and culture are equally as nebulous and equally as impactful, and I would even argue that they're kind of the same thing. That brand is kind of like culture for capitalism or culture for products or business or commerce, where when we think about culture, we think about human behavior. Brand is been defined as a feeling. Brand's been defined as what people say about you when you're not in the room. I personally like to define brand as your reputation brought to life in words, actions, and images. So bringing your reputation to life is the kind of job of brand as like a human influencer, essentially giving me context, a reason to believe, and a framework. And that is different than positioning, which is essentially giving yourself a very true, if you do it right, a very true and authentic touch point from which you understand the context of that brand. So brand positioning being kind of the articulation or the act of defining it, and then brand itself being the expression.
I like it. I like it. This is something that I've heard so many people define brands in so many different ways, and one of my favorites is where somebody really confidently says, "Oh yeah, that's really simple," and then they give a totally different definition than everybody else. But I like it as I think you said your reputation in the form of images and words, and that I really like that. Have I encapsulated that right?
We're brand brought to life in words, actions, and images.
Yes.
So what that tells you is you can only control the conversation so much, because your reputation is your reputation.
Mm-hmm.
That's I don't want to say you can't control it, because absolutely you can. You can create the narrative and give people reasons to believe through positioning, through messaging, through core values, through mission, through any of the ways that you want to express yourself. But your reputation is something that's kind of in the hands of the people, shall we say. And so, how do you bring that to life? Identify the best parts of yourself or the things you want to reinforce, and then reinforce them through the way you write an email, the way you answer a phone call, the way you show up on a live, the way you put out a one pager, the way you start a TikTok channel, the way you just express yourself in any kind of way. By controlling the conversation in these kind of like, well articulated buckets, then people start talking about you in the way you want them to talk about you. So if you're, it's hard to use I don't know if in Ireland you have like really awful experiences dealing with internet service providers or telephone setup or someone to come in and hook up some kind of utility, where the brand, everyone thinks of hassle, like hassle, wait, inconvenience. That's kind of like the reputation that a larger, like, cell phone provider, etc., might kind of have. And they can only control that conversation to the point where, like, well, sorry, your 1.5 hour wait times to talk to someone on the phone is reinforcing your reputation as being this kind of like behemoth of a hassle to deal with. So if a company wanted to start shifting that conversation, they might then think of more unapologetic ways to be themselves. And maybe that's around, an app development, or telling real stories from people who have waited an hour and a half in line, but then got something really awesome done, or kind of lean into, I don't know. I'm making all that stuff up, but your reputation you can control to some extent, and you can't control to some extent. So if you start shaping that conversation very specifically by the way that you express yourself, hopefully, because you put your money where your mouth is and you're not just saying you're these things without doing these things, then people recognize that. And when they start saying your words back to you on a sales call, you've made it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think having that language, you've got it when somebody repeats the actual wording that you wrote in an email or having a sales page or something. That you nailed it.
It's so surreal. You're so surreal. But if you can, that's the whole point of it, is when you can start using this like branded set of like words and phrases or actions or ideas or feelings, and you're reinforcing them at every touch point. It's more than just saying it. You have to actively do it. So here's a great example. One of my core values is to show up for people. And how that translates is that people say to me, you've never missed a meeting in a year. You've never missed a deadline. You've never done this. You've never done that. That's the value showing up, to show up for people over and over again. I don't specifically say, I'm here to show up for you today, but it's manifest in my actions and my reputation for being like, when we have a call in the books, you're not going to get a text from me 45 minutes earlier and being like, can we move this? Like, it's not going to happen. So those are my actions reinforcing my brand as someone who actively shows up for people. So this isn't about my core value, like anybody's core value. And how do you just make it come to life? It's much more than what your graphics look like or how you're running your Instagram channel. It's the things you actually do to reinforce or to break your brand.
Okay, so I want to skip to a different topic because we're coming close on time. So I want to.
Oh my God! Already?
Yeah,
We're just getting started.
We are flying. We're 25 minutes in. Yeah, I want to ask you. I want to ask you, if you were talking to somebody who has just left corporate, because there's an awful lot of people who've just left corporate, and they're out. They've hung out the sign. They're just starting their own gig, and there's a lot of people who are experts. They might call themselves a consultant of some type. Where would you recommend that they start with the whole thing of trying to brand themselves and trying to position themselves? I don't know if I'm asking you to repeat yourself here, and I apologize if I am, but But if somebody's in that situation, they like, maybe they've got one client or they've got two clients on board, but they're not really sure of any of this stuff. Yeah, what advice would you have for them?
Oh my God, this is a topic near and dear to my heart because as an entrepreneurial branding person, I'm like one of the first people that the mass exodus from corporate comes to see because they need some sort of website and they need copy or they need to position themselves or they need to kind of get out there in terms of marketing. So I'm generally one of the first stops on that train. So I've seen a lot of people kind of in the, exiting corporate and coming into an entrepreneurial space to hang out a shingle with their own thing. First of all, I've got some great news. This is the time. This is the time, unlike any other time in our history, to be able to do that. You can take your expertise and couple it with an insatiable curiosity and self directed learning that will allow you to bypass the hierarchy of the corporate ladder and go straight to the C suite with whatever it is that you are selling, consulting, creative services, a package, a program, employee development, leadership, whatever it is. You can use the digital space, the internet to, learn whatever you need to learn, bypass the whole corporate ladder and go straight to the C-suite to sell. So that's great news. There's never been a time like that ever where particularly women, can go out and just make a name for themselves by hanging a shingle. So great news. The bad news is that the mindset that many people have when they leave that is not running towards a new business, but away from a bad boss. So, first thing I want you to do is like take some time to deconstruct the workplace trauma that you're currently taking to your new job. And your new job being hang out your own shingle because you did just buy yourself a job until you make it a business. It may be the coolest job you ever had, or you may be the worst boss you ever had. My boss is relentless. She doesn't give me any days off. She's mad at me when I don't work all the time. She has unrealistic expectations. She doesn't pay me consistently. She's the worst. But if you're willing to take on that boss, please know that you're bringing baggage from this like really toxic work environment with you. And if you don't take the time to kind of like unburden yourself with that, then you're going to bring those fears into your business. And those fears might look like, I don't give away anything for free. I don't, I won't get on a discovery call with someone for more than 15 minutes. If it's not a solid referral, I'm not moving forward. So like these defensive mechanisms that you've had from years of being taken advantage of or not being able to advance or step into your genius in a corporate environment are coming with you to entrepreneurship. So take a breath and put that aside. Then step into entrepreneur as something you want to be, a goal you're moving towards, not something that you're running away from. Clear your mind and start thinking about who are my people? Who are they? I love working for, this is not me, I'm just making this up. I love working for change makers who are impacting the world, but, are stuck in management roles they can't seem to lift themselves out of. And if they just took my advice, think about it in these narratives that will help you start to articulate who you are and what you deliver. When you do that, your marketing just flows so naturally because you can start talking to them directly. Hey, upper management leadership, are you stuck in a role you can't seem to get out of because you can't seem to break through the glass ceiling? I'm here to help. I'm the business and leadership coach that can help you, go from director to VP in less than 18 months by shaping your mindset and giving you actionable goals, holding you accountable, whatever reason, because I've been there myself. Like that's the sales pitch that can come out of just articulating who are my people and what do they need. And that's all positioning is. Who are my people? What do they need? Who am I? What do I deliver? And why am I special, different, or the one? And that special, different, or the one is generally your personal stake, your unique point of view, or like you said, Alastair, like what are the things I'm punching down at right now, or what are the hills I'm going to die on, or what are the causes I'm going to fight or take up with or take issue? and leaning into a problem solver role. So take a breath, be glad you're here, but also, you really do have to leave that stuff behind, or you'll end up just um, working for yourself in a way that doesn't make you happy. And there's no point in hanging out your shingle if you're not going to feel freedom,
Mhm.
lifestyle freedom.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the first times I've heard anybody talk about, uh, I'm rewording this, putting aside the PTSD of your job. But I completely understand that because I probably had that back in 2007 when I left my corporate job because I was a terrible employee. And I needed to, for my mental health and for the mental health of anybody who worked with me, I needed to leave. So that was the reason I went out on my own, is because I just didn't make for a good employee. Um,
Same. I can't. I cannot work for somebody else very successfully,
mhm,
for lots of the same reasons. And I think many entrepreneurs are wired like that.
yeah.
And if you're a problem solver, or you like to do things differently, or you can make an impact, you will probably really kind of that's in the DNA of who you are. But many people who go into business and hang out a shingle now, it's not the DNA of who they are. They're running away from a bad situation,
Mhm,
or just like crappy culture, or a toxic boss, or unrealistic hours, or shitty pay, or any of the reasons that we do. And sometimes that can mean you go from being an employee mindset right into a job. It's like making a job for yourself just happens to have your name on it, and you still have an employee mindset. For many years, I was the best waitress in my own business. I probably still have my days where I'm just like the world's greatest waitress in my own business.
okay, let me ask you, what is one thing that you wish you knew before you started the business?
I think most people would say, "Wish I knew it was so hard." I'm actually glad I didn't know that it was so hard, because I might not have really had the courage to do it.
Mhm,
Um, I think the thing that's the most shocking, or what I wished that I had been privy to, is that there's just such a long slog of never knowing if you're ever really going to air quote make it. There's no, like, when you're in school or college or university, it's pretty show up for class, do your homework, take the test, make sure the professor knows your name, you're going to pass. Pass those classes, you'll have a degree. Entrepreneurship, it can be 10 years down the road, and you're still like, well, on paper, I'm still kind of actually bankrupt. Someone else would say this business has failed, but you're still showing up day after day after day after day after day. So, like, when you first start out, you're like, well, in 3 to 5 years, I won't have this problem. You're right. You have different problems, and it's still hard, and you still feel like a newbie. So, grit, get good at grit.
get good at grit. Yeah, that's true, that's true.
Yeah,
Um,
get good at grit.
it's something I think because I've got a podcast with over 100 episodes, so I'm able to do the long slug. It's something I think about, that I don't really have any calibration on what it's like to have a normal job anymore, because it's too long since I did have one, and so I have no idea if I'm being productive on a daily basis. I think that sometimes I have days where I get a week's worth of work done, for a normal employee, and then I have weeks where I get a day's worth of work done, and I don't really have any calibration on any of that. So that is one thing I do find a little bit difficult sometimes. Um,
Well, I would coach you to kind of recalibrate what your definition of success is, and what did come out of that. A couple weeks ago, I had a miraculously blank week in my calendar, like unbelievable. No calls. So I blocked it, and I was like, I'm going to write the introduction to this book that I'm working on, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a whole week to do it. It's been amazing. I didn't write shit from that introduction at all. I did not. And I might, if I had kind of like the mindset that you're describing, I might beat myself up about it. Like, you had a whole week and you didn't do anything. But what I did do was come up with this idea that is henceforth taken like a huge life of itself, that I might not have come up with that idea if I didn't have the white space to just be and exist. And instead of like beating myself up about how I never wrote the introduction to the book, I celebrate now how I came up with this like crazy idea to create a board game around branding. And that wouldn't have come out if I hadn't given myself that white space. So I would coach you to kind of like recalibrate your relationship to your idea of productivity. And sometimes a single idea in a few weeks is better than pages and pages of deliverables in a single day.
Yeah, I think I'm not beating myself up about it, but I just do wonder sometimes. I really
You
do.
seem to be doing all right, but that's from the outside, right?
Oh, of course, everybody's doing all right. Like nobody shows the tough days on their Instagram highlights reel. That's the other side. Yeah, I mean, I'm doing okay. I'm happy with where things are at. It's taken a long time to get my business to six figures, but I'm happy that it has a sustainable income and it's paying for itself. So no longer do I consider the podcast a loss leader. It's actually paying for itself now,
That's
finally.
awesome.
But it did take the best part of 100 episodes to get there. That's 100 weeks. That's years. So
Absolutely.
and you got to be able to make that work, and that's the part you do. Like I was talking to a guy who is a Americans have this horrible word, the winningest. He's won the most boxing fights of any boxer in US history. His name is Cam Awesome. I put out his podcast episode this week. But his approach is, if you just basically tolerate failure for long enough, you will inevitably be successful. If you just don't give up, you
Just
will,
the
like,
process
success.
of beating
Yeah,
you against the rocks is honing you for that level of
yeah.
success. But a lot of people want to get out of the rock beating
This
because
is
it's
it. Yeah,
uncomfortable.
yeah. I think that you do need a certain mental strength, and maybe you get that. Maybe that's something that you get from entrepreneurship as well. Maybe it creates that. I do. I have to watch the clock for us here. I want to ask you, what is the number one tip that you would give to somebody who wants to build their authority?
Listen. That's the number one tip I have is to listen to what other people are telling you. And I don't just mean business coaches, I mean your clients. I mean colleagues that you're running into. If you hear it once, it's interesting. If you hear it 3 times, it's a pattern. So listen to what people are telling you, that you're either places you delivered value or things that were confusing, or um, just any kind of feedback that you're getting from the world, and use that feedback to kind of help you shape your path and what you're going to become recognized in. I started out as like just a roundsman for marketing. Like, oh, you need me someone to run your Facebook page? I'm your girl. You need someone to do this? I'm your person. And then from there, it's like, I really like is the copywriting piece of it more than anything. So then I really kind of like leaned into copywriting. People are telling me what they really get value out of is when I do the brand strategy piece. So then I start moving in that direction. So it's really like listening and not just assuming the way I'll make it out here is to kind of be a jack of all trades for marketing. Not true. Actually, as you kind of go through and you just listen for feedback and you shape how you move or kind of carve your path, it's almost kind of, as you mentioned earlier, like the process of getting beat against the rocks. You emerge an authority in that piece because you're leading with listening, with curiosity, and then also with that entrepreneurial superpower of self-discovery and self-education that will, I'm really curious about how that happens. And then you go down the rabbit hole of research and you're able to integrate that into your knowledge and those things over time. So listen, be curious, and kind of let feedback carve your path.
Yeah, really great answer. Thank you. Can you tell us about a business mistake or failure that you've experienced and what you learned from it?
Oh my God. Does today count? I mean, every day it's a litany of mistakes that you're trying to learn from. I think probably the biggest mistake I ever made was very early in my entrepreneurial journey, and I worked in restaurants, and I worked in independent restaurants, and I had a strong network of restaurateurs, and I was married to a fine dining chef. And so I thought, and the market in Washington D.C. where I lived was emerging for independent food businesses, food halls. There's really this renaissance of kind of independent, quirky little restaurants, and I thought I could help them compete with the corporate, landscape by bringing my knowledge to the table. I could, but what I called it was operations, not marketing, because I thought, well, this is operational. No one has a budget for strategy or operations in food. They have a budget for marketing. So because I refused to call myself a marketing person, refused to acknowledge that what I was doing was actually marketing because I wanted to be a consultant, that's the hat I wanted to wear, I never made any real business. If I had spun myself as a marketer or a branding person, which is what I really was, that people had a line item for that they could recognize, I probably would have had a less rocky journey of 5 years of abject failure with that business. But I learned a lot, and now I listen when people say, "You know what? I have a budget for a marketing person, but not operations."
Yeah, it's really amazing how humbling these kind of experiences have been. I had something similar. I refer to it as my MBA because it cost me about the same amount of time and money. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. 5 years, $20,000 a year investment,
yeah,
and just like nothing.
it's tough. Okay, what about resources? Is there a business book or resource that's been important for you, or that you'd recommend to people?
I can't not lean into, so cliched marketing to talk about Seth Godin,
Mhm.
but Seth Godin really does understand the way that marketing is spiritual in a way, and that how you can express yourself as a brand is very, very powerful. And then I also kick it really old school with Guy Kawasaki, who was an evangelist for Apple way back in the
Oh yeah.
days when Apple and PC were competing. He really understands. He has this beautiful book called Enchantment, which is about how to create a relationship with not only your customers, which is where he kind of leans, but also your colleagues and other people laterally kind of in your pod by just not by under promising and over delivering essentially. And I think that those are two beautiful authors to really lean into.
Yeah, two great authors, and I've been following both of those for a long time. What about fiction? Do you read fiction? Is there anything you love and recommend?
I do. I love novels. I'm obsessed with this novel, and it's probably, I don't know, 30 years old at this point, by the English author Martin Amis, called Time's Arrow. And I just gave that a beautiful reread, and it's so fascinating, speaking of perspective, because the entire book is told in reverse from like a Nazi war crime general, like from his death essentially, in reverse of his life. And when I tell you in reverse, it is in reverse. So you have to do the mental gymnastics to understand that he's like eating soup or getting dressed, because it is literally like he threw up all over a spoon. Like it's all like in reverse. And you have to, in your mind, mirror the actions to understand what he's actually doing. And it's just a really interesting kind of walk through one human experience backwards, like in reverse. So Time's Arrow is a really neat
That
ride.
sounds very strange and very interesting.
It's cool. He does a lot of really meta and fourth wall stuff when people weren't really doing that. So highly recommend Time's Arrow by Martin Amis.
Cool. Okay, well, it's definitely the first time that has been recommended on the show, so thank you for that.
Indeed.
Okay, well, Rebecca, we're going to have to wrap it. Where can people find you if they want to learn more?
Thank you for asking. I have a beautiful new baby brand bouncing on the marketplace right now called Stoned Fruit, STONEDFRUIT.com. And that is a place to learn big time about positioning and messaging. I have some DIY resources up there, other content sources to learn about this and copy. And we're having a really good time over there at Stone Fruit. The copy is hilariously fun. So come and check us out.
Yeah, and I love your imagery and photos and graphics and everything. It looks cool. So yeah, I recommend people check that out. Well,
Thanks.
thank you so much for coming on and going live with us today. It's been
I
a
had a
pleasure.
blast. Thank you. What a cool time. I hope we'll have another show here coming up where we're going to do some positioning for you.
100%.
Why?
Absolutely.
Let's
I'm
do it.
definitely going to do that.
It's fun.
So thanks for listening or watching, and see you in the next one.